everybody, it's Allison. Welcome to my YouTube channel and welcome to another fun video featuring the monthly club kits for Spellbinders. Today we're going to be looking at the April club kits, mainly the large die of the month, but we'll take a look at some of the other kits as well. So here are the two cards that I have made so far with the kits. And we're going to jump right into the large die of the month. This month it's called Pins and Needles Jar, and you can see here is the jar itself. And there's all of these little, just fun little accessories. There's a little embroidery floss, there's a thimble, there's pins and needles, and a button. There's some thread and scissors. And then there's this bobbin along with a die that cuts the thread. And here is the small die of the month. This is called Faux Stitched Sentiments and Floss. So you'll see there's a bunch of sentiments and there's pieces that make the floss. So here's floss that I've already completed. And I'm quickly going to show you how to assemble this floss. It's really easy. And while you watch me doing this, the words off to the side, there's hello, happy, thanks, and then for you. And they're really fun word dies. You'll see me use one of those word dies later in the video. So this is just creating a little thing of embroidery floss, and this little part is creating the label that you would see on embroidery floss, and I think they're really cute. All right, speaking of floss, this is the Stencil of the Month Club, and it's called Rainbow Floss Background. And there are 5 stencils to this layering set, and it's just a really fun set. These 2 stencils create the labels, and then the other ones created the actual strands of floss and the detail. All right, let's jump into the first card. Now, I am making a wreath. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a base for my wreath. And I'm just taking 2 circles from this Postage edge circle die set. But you can use any nesting circle die set that you have. I'm just taking 2 different sizes to create a ring. And I'm going to leave these 2 rings taped together like this so I can cut a second piece. And that way I know that they're the same exact size. And I can glue those together to make a stronger base. Now I'm going to create some foliage because every wreath needs foliage, right? So this is the die that cuts the floss that goes on the bobbin that I showed you earlier. So here's those 2 dies. And here is what this piece looks like when you die cut it. Now, I just cut it in half, and these are the little pieces that I am creating foliage from for the first layer of my wreath. And how did I come up with the idea of doing a wreath? I have no idea. If you've watched any of my other videos using monthly club kits, I like to do different things with the kits. By the way, I'm just taking some cracked pistachio distress ink and coloring the base of the wreath, just to give it a base of green. And so here I am gluing on all of those pieces, and there's what it looks like when it's done. Now I'm going to create a second layer of foliage, and for this layer I'm using the little embroidery floss that comes in the large die kit, and I'm just going to cut the ends off of that. And so you see I cut it out several times, many times, and these are just the ends, and I cut them down, and I'm just gluing the bottom of these little loops on here. So you'll see I'm putting glue at the very bottom, and I am gluing them all around again. So this is just creating a second layer. And because I only glued the bottom, I can kind of lift them to create some dimension, and you'll see a little bit later I can loop stuff through there. And speaking of loops, this is the loops embossing folder. This is an older embossing folder, but I thought it went perfectly with the theme. And so I'm just taking some pink Distress Oxide, and this is actually the back side of the folder. This is the debossed side, and I'm just inking up the very edges of this panel. And this panel is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so it's the same size as my A2 card base that I'll adhere it to. And there's the opposite side, the embossed side, but I actually liked the debossed side, so that's the side that we're going to use. And now I've added some thin foam tape to the back of my wreath, and then I can just adhere it to my card base. So I've already adhered my embossed panel to my A2 card base, and now the wreath is on there. Now this sentiment comes from the Pins and Needles Sentiments die set. This is the freebie that you get with the deluxe caboodle kit. And I think there are 2 other sentiments that come with this. But I picked this sentiment, the So Many Thanks sentiment. And now I'm just going to start figuring out what I want to put on this wreath. So here's a button that I cut out of pink cardstock and a needle with some thread through it. And I really have no idea how long it took me to come up with how to complete this wreath. By the way, this string was one trick I found to kind of hide some of the unfinished look of the inner part of that circle. And here's this cute little safety pin, and I cut all of my pins and needles out of a silver mirrored cardstock, so they look really cool in real life. I'm not sure if you can tell very much on screen, but they look awesome. They look real. So again, I'm just trying to come up with ways to cover that inner part of the circle, and here's the finished card. You'll see I added all kinds of pins, needles, buttons, string, and I think it's really fun and just a different idea. And here is my next card. So this is a shaker card, and I am starting with the main die, the jar, and you'll see I cut it out of white cardstock. And this panel measures 4 1/2 by 6 1/2, and you'll see on the back of the panel I've already put some Scor-Tape, and I'm just gonna pull the release tape off, and now I have a piece of acetate that's just slightly smaller than this panel, and now I can put this on there and make sure it's adhered nicely. And I have this back panel that I inked up very slightly with some cracked pistachio distress ink, and now I have all these buttons. These are actual real buttons, and I'm putting them on straight onto the back panel of this shaker. Now to make this shaker, I'm pulling some of my foam tape. This is Altenew foam tape, and I'm going to double it up. So I'm just folding it onto itself, and that way it's already doubled up, and I can just trim it to length, and I'll do that for each side. Now for the bottom, I need to just trim it down because it was too wide. So I've already doubled it up, and now I'm just cutting it. And again, I'm just creating the well that these buttons are going to stay in. Now I am taking an anti-static powder tool and rubbing it all over the buttons, all over that back panel, and now I'm rubbing it along the side of this foam tape. And you'll see that I added some foam tape to the top of the jar, The lid is actually going to cover that foam tape, but I didn't want the buttons to fly up too high. So that foam tape is just going to stop the buttons from going up beyond that point. And I've glued the base to, or the shaker mechanism to my card base, which is 5x7. And now these two pieces, this is the very top of the lid, and then there's the actual lid. And I cut these out of white cardstock just to create a base. But for the actual top of my lid, it's supposed to be like fabric where you can stick pins in. I actually used the main die, the big jar, to cut that green piece out, just the very top of it. I really wanted it to look like it was part of the lid, not sitting right on top of the lid. So that's why I just made this green piece a little bit bigger. Now I'm taking my craft pick and I am creating holes in that lid so that I can put my pins in. And then it will look like the pins are actually stuck in this fabric lid. Now on the back of this piece, I am just taking some very thin Scor-Tape and taping the back of those needles and pins. It's just helping keep everything in place and helping me glue everything down. And now here's the actual lid that I cut out of that silver mirrored cardstock. And just going to let you listen to the fun buttons shaking around. All right, now I have created a label for the jar. I used pink paper. I added little strips of that mirrored cardstock along the edges. And this is the So Lovely stamp set from Concord and Ninth. And the sentiment says so many thanks, but I don't want it to say thanks. So I'm going to do some partial stamping. And to do that, I'm just taking some washi tape and I'm going to cover up the word thanks. And I already positioned the stamp on the label where I needed it to be, and you'll see in a moment why I needed it positioned in a certain way. But once I covered that thanks, I could stamp my VersaMark ink onto the stamp, lift off the washi tape, then stamp it. Now I'm repeating it just to give it a second layer of ink. And now I'm just using some white embossing powder. And off camera, I will heat that up with my embossing tool. So here is the thanks. This is from the small die of the month. Remember, there were all those words that come in the small die kit. And so now the sentiment says so many thanks. And now I decided I'm just going to add some Scor-Tape along the edges of this label. That's enough to keep it secured. And this thread that I wanted through the needle at the top, it kept kind of coming in and out. So I'm putting a little bit of glue on a scrap piece of paper and getting glue right underneath that little loop. And then I can just attach that loop to the lid, and that's going to keep everything secure. And there is the final card. And I think it's really sweet. I love the little buttons. And here are both cards together. And then the fun, you can see the fun floss from the small die. And up at the top, you'll see that bobbin with the thread. Remember, that thread is what I used for the foliage on the wreath. So I hope that you enjoyed watching this. I know the wreath was kind of out there, but I had a lot of fun making both of these cards, and I think this month's kits are so fun. Even if you don't like sewing, I'm sure you know somebody who does. And after all, we make cards to give to people. So I think the theme of this month's kits are just really fun and really useful, I think. that's it for me. I really appreciate you being here with me today. As always, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.